Civil Society Network, West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, is calling on all political parties and their candidates to observe the Peace Accord agreement and maintain a peaceful election. The group's project director says that Nigerians are eager to get it right, as more than 48 million youths have been registered by INEC. He also calls on the media to counter information and to promote accurate reporting of the elections.
Observations have also been made about multiple security concerns that could significantly threaten the smooth conduct of the elections. These include a strong undertone of religious and ethnic tensions taking center stage in the political discourse and debate among political parties and candidates alike.
In our statement, we made a very strong case that faith-based organizations, CSOs, media, and other intermediary voices to ensure that they use their platform to preach against the use of disinformation, misinformation, and all other activities that has the potential for triggering violence in the elections.
Well, let's bring in Paul James, Election Program Manager, Yaga Africa, as well as Paul Osei-Kuffour, the Anglophone Coordinator for the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, both James.
Both Pauls.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. So both Paul. Thank you so much. I would like to begin with you, Paul James. Yes. So when you say 22 states in Nigeria are at risk of manipulation, 28 days to the commencement of the next general election. Tell us what this means. I mean, how do you categorize these 22 states? I know there are 6 variables, which were mentioned in Georgina's report, but how did we come about 22 states?
So these are the product of intense research and also expert interviews that the partners that conducted this election manipulation risk index had done over the last 2 months. And we defined the election manipulation risk index as a tool that is designed to curb election manipulation, one, and also help stakeholders, especially in planning, that's the election management body, and for citizens to help us also in the oversight of the process. So we got 6 variables that we are tracking. One of them is the INEC capture. The other one is also attempt to tamper with the voter register. Another variable is voter suppression. Another one is resistance to election technology, history of election manipulation, and electoral fraud. So what we did for the 22 states is to say, for any of these states that have either of 3 of these variables, we mark it as high risk. Any of these states that has either of 2 variables, we categorize it as medium risk, and any state that had 1 variable, we categorize this as low risk. For the 22 states, they are the states that have either of 1, 2, or 3 of the variables, like I said. And then if we look at the concerns that we had raised, one is about INEC capture. We are concerned about some recruitments that had happened in recent past in the commission. We are also concerned about attempt to undermine the integrity of the process, perhaps by not providing resources to INEC when INEC need resources, because the electoral act had made it clear that resources should be advanced to INEC 360 days to the election. If we also look at the attacks that have been happening at INEC facilities, in 2022 alone, we got 9 attacks that happened. That these are all attempts in by our estimation, to undermine the credibility of the election. One of the risks that we had also seen is also about voter suppression in terms of even the PVC distribution, this collection that is ongoing, for instance. If there are attempts not to allow citizens access to these PVCs, or if there are even attempts, for instance, to undermine the integrity of INEC in its efforts to even reach out to this citizen by the constant attack that we have been seeing. So And then there is also the history of election manipulation that have happened in other states in the past. So what we try to do is looking at the histories in the past and also the recent happening to begin to catalog these issues as they are happening and begin to place them base of this state. I mean, how did we get this report? This is a product of research, like I said, by credible election observer groups from the pre-election assessment, and also product of research from reports, INEC reports from the 2019 election, and also the recent election that INEC had conducted. Same also expert interviews, like I mentioned, with stakeholders that are involved in the electoral process. So it's, with all of this effort that we're able to put these issues together.
All right. Thanks so very much, Paul. You've, to a very large extent, expatiated on the indices raised. But let's go to our overflow studios, where Paul Osei-Kuffour, the coordinator of the West African Solidarity Network, they've been visiting Nigeria, meeting with stakeholders on the forthcoming general elections. What are those things that are striking to you about Nigerians, or the voters, the electorate, and the forthcoming elections? And where are you, bringing in your solidarity at this point?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have this session with you and also with the Arise News team. So we arrived in Nigeria on Tuesday. We started the observation mission on the 24th, and we ended today. We held a press release, press briefing with the media. The major key points that we shared with the media was to the effect that we recognize the gains and the progress that has been made with these particular elections compared to previous elections in Nigeria. If you look at the deployment of the BVAS, the bimodal voter verification assessment, and then you look at the IREF, which is the INEC results viewing portal. These are additions that will enhance and inspire confidence in the electoral process.
Okay, Paul James, I mean, 3 states you categorize as low risk. They are the Gombe, Ondo, and the Federal Capital Territory. Make up those 3. What are they doing right? And what do we need to do in the next 27 days to mitigate these issues you've raised? Is it even possible to mitigate them 27 days to the elections?
So this report is the first iteration report, and it was based on what we saw when we're putting this together between November, December, and early January. There will be 2 more reports before the 2023 elections. Sadly, some of these states that we had categorized at low risk before now are beginning to turn something else. So, like we said, these indicators, these variables that we have are not cast on stone. And deliberately, what we decided to do was to focus on the election management body. Any attempt to subvert or undermine the efforts of the Commission to conduct credible elections. So, we did not spotlight, for instance, concerns around security. So, we're beginning to see also those threats, because security could also be used as a threat in the elections. So, security could be used to manipulate the election. So we are aware of that, but deliberately what we decided to look at is what are those issues or those concerns that could limit the engagement of the Commission in the process. So as of when this report was put together, there were no serious concerns in those states. But then we are beginning to see, like I said, deliberate efforts to undermine the Commission. We have seen, for instance, even when appointments happen for states like Jigawa, the National Electoral Commission that was appointed for Jigawa is someone from Sokoto State that had contested election in the past, and we saw how citizens reacted to this appointment. So we are concerned that in terms of citizen confidence in the process, if this kind of appointments are not corrected, it could potentially affect their confidence to go out and engage the process. Some of the what we also try to do with this is also provide some likely solution. One of the recommendations we had made was in the appointment of appointment of officials for the election, we had advised that for administrative secretaries, for instance, for officers that have been in charge of the ICTs, in charge of INEC operations, that this should be official, that INEC should review this appointment or deployment and ensure that the people that are deployed to these states are people that are non-partisan and the people that will be professional in engagement of the process. So we thought with all of this, I mean, we are going to provide 2 more reports. We are looking at what is happening across the state, and hopefully these states will stay low, or perhaps it will change before we get into the elections.
Okay, let's go to Osei-Kuffour in our offsite studio. What kind of advocacy is your organization bringing to bear on the forthcoming elections in Nigeria from February 25th, particularly when we have other elections in the West African sub-region? Is it a sine qua non for stability in the sub-region?
Yes, you agree with me that currently we are experiencing high level of political instability in West Africa. The entire West African environment is very volatile, so there are a lot of expectations around the Nigeria elections. So the advocacy that we are bringing, particularly to this election, is to encourage Nigerians to set an exemplary model and become the indication for other elections that will be held in the sub-region, especially in June. That is where Liberia, Sierra Leone will have its election, and October, that will be the turn of Liberia as well. So in constituting our election mission, we brought on board members of WADEMOS from these countries and other West African countries to have a first-hand experience of some of the best practices and reforms that Nigeria is putting across. But on a more substantive point, we made some critical observation about this election, and I'm happy that the INEC chair has come out to declare that there will be a mock exercise or a simulation exercise to demonstrate the use of the biometric, voter verification device. This is something that has come up a lot. There's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of concern around the potential malfunctioning of the BVAS machine. And I'm happy that the demonstration or the simulation exercise will largely inspire confidence and enhance trust in the deployment of technology for this particular election. Let me also emphasize...
Go on.
Yes, let me also emphasize the point about the PVCs, the permanent voter cards. This is also a major concern that we have gathered in our engagement with all stakeholders that we spoke to, especially among civil society organizations. The concern is that Nigeria over the years has experienced a lot of low voter turnout. And this is an election that we've seen a lot of high interest and enthusiasm among voters in Nigeria. You look at the voter register population and you have about 93 or over 93 million population on the roll. To be able to support or facilitate the process for these 93 point something million voters to exercise their franchise requires an accreditation process. And the only means for accreditation, as really proclaimed by INEC, is that there will be no verification, no vote. So if there is no verification, no vote, how will citizens be able to go through the accreditation process? They require the PVCs. And still, potential voters are experiencing a lot of challenges getting access to their PVC. And it is something that is a lot of worry for us as observers, because if you are not able to ensure that a lot of voters are able to access their PVC, it will lead to a disenfranchisement of a lot of these voters who may not be able to turn up to go through the accreditation process on the day of election. So we are urging the citizens of Nigeria to also show a lot of interest to go and collect their PVCs so that on the day of election they will be able to exercise their franchise. This is something that will enhance the integrity and the investment that have been poured into this particular election so that the voter turnout will be a very good model for Africa going forward.
Thank you so much. Very well said. Paul James, a clarification and a question. In one of your variables that you explained, INEC capture, you did mention releasing funds early for INEC. Are you saying that INEC did not get all the resources on time, or has not gotten all the resources it needs to execute the 2023 elections as we speak? And then let me ask you the question, because Osei mentioned it, succinctly, and of course coincided with the tribunal judgment in Osun State today. BVAS was used. The Electoral Act 2022 had come into force when the election took place. Yet we hear about overvoting. How is that possible? And what does this do to the confidence of Nigerians for INEC to prosecute this election with technology such as BVAS?
Thank you. So to the first question on INEC and funding for the election, to the best of my knowledge, as this moment, I don't have the information whether INEC had received 100% of the resources it needs to execute the election. Now, the concern we've also had over time is the fact that INEC is not always proactive in its communication. They are always reactive. If you want to inspire confidence, this is when citizens want to know, citizens want to be engaged. If you have if there are concerns around resources to execute the election, let us know. INEC on this part have constantly assured Nigerians that they have enough to do what, that's why we see that a lot has been happening, so they have enough. But then if you recall that the funding for this election was at 305 billion. And between when this budget was released for the election and now, we know what had happened to INEC. Even the constant attack on INEC facilities, we thought that had weighed down on INEC's planning, and then whether or not INEC had gone back to ask for a supplementary budget, or whether or not they are receiving support from other development partners to help INEC augment some of this. We don't have that information. So I cannot specifically say whether INEC had received 100% of its funding, but the Commission had assured that it has enough, and that is why it is going on with its own planning for the election. We just hope that they will not surprise us on the eve of the election to say they are not adequately prepared for the election.
Well, Paul James, no better place for you to drop the anchor here. Paul James is programs manager, elections with Yaga Africa. And in our offsite studio, we've had Paul Osei-Kuffour. He's the West Africa coordinator, Anglophone coordinator of the West Africa Solidarity Network. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming on Newsnight.